Welcome to my history channel. Why do people work their entire lives, yet still feel controlled by the system they built? You wake up every single Monday morning with a heavy heart and deep reluctance. You drag your exhausted physical body into the relentless mechanical rhythm of modern employment. You willingly trade your irreplaceable biological time for a highly predictable monetary salary. You use that hard-earned salary to purchase fleeting moments of synthetic consumer happiness. Then you immediately return to your labor to fund your very next fleeting purchase. Is this endless, repetitive cycle truly the inescapable destiny of modern human existence? We must look back through the fog of history to understand how this invisible cage was carefully forged. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Work and Freedom. Before the deafening roar of the Industrial Revolution shattered the quiet earth, human survival was dictated exclusively by the natural elements. Our ancient ancestors did not follow a standardized clock or a factory whistle. Their daily rhythms were completely synchronized with the rising sun and the constantly changing seasons. However, this ancient reality was far from a peaceful pastoral utopia. If you existed during the peak of the agricultural era, you were likely an ordinary peasant struggling against starvation. During the frantic spring planting and summer harvesting seasons, your morning alarm was the very first cry of the rooster. You stepped barefoot into freezing muddy water, enduring vicious leech bites, while the scorching sun relentlessly burned your exhausted back. You could never afford to stop working because the seasons would never wait for your weary bones. If you planted your tiny seeds just one day late, your entire family would inevitably face brutal starvation during the approaching winter. You labored intensely until the thick darkness of night completely stripped away your vision, leaving your legs utterly numb. Even when the cruel winter arrived, you did not experience anything resembling a vacation. You retreated into a drafty hut, desperately minimizing every physical movement just to conserve your rapidly depleting energy. You mended broken farming tools by dim light, staring blankly at the empty bottom of your grain barrel, quietly praying you could survive until the spring. Upholstery work was once a brutal struggle for raw survival rather than a structured corporate system. Chapter 2. The Escape from the Farm. By the year 1845, the world was violently transitioning from the quiet twilight of agricultural civilization into the blazing dawn of the industrial age. Over in Europe, Britain boasted the title of the factory of the world, yet the hidden cost was massive human suffering. Thousands of displaced farmers crowded into filthy underground cellars. Meanwhile, across the vast ocean, the American continent was experiencing an unprecedented wave of aggressive expansion. Driven by the ideology of manifest destiny, the nation acted as a giant sponge, eagerly absorbing desperate European laborers. That exact same year, a devastating potato famine completely swept through Ireland, forcing starving peasants to flee or face certain death. To survive this historical catastrophe, a desperate man named John Ford gathered his family and boarded a decaying immigrant ship destined for America. Tragedy struck when his wife died from disease during the brutal voyage across the Atlantic Ocean. His eldest son, William, became the sole pillar of the broken family at just 21 years old. William worked tirelessly to erase the family debts and eventually settled in Dearborn, Michigan, where land was cheap. He proudly built a two-story house painted pure white, believing he had secured a safe agricultural legacy for his bloodline. In the year 1863, his eldest son, Henry Ford, was born inside that very house. William assumed his son would graciously inherit this hard-fought land and continue the proud farming tradition. However, young Henry possessed a rebellious spirit that utterly despised the backbreaking agricultural lifestyle. He viewed the endless chores of digging potatoes, milking cows, and cleaning foul-smelling barns as nothing more than senseless and agonizing physical torture. A father saw the farm as salvation, but the son saw it as a prison. Chapter 3. The Obsession with Machines. Young Henry harbored deep resentment toward the farm horses because they smelled terrible and required endless manual feeding. He wondered if a tireless power source could someday replace fragile flesh and blood. His entire worldview fractured. In 1875, when, at the age of 12, he encountered a massive steam traction engine belching white smoke. The terrifying steel monster badly frightened his father's horses, but Henry jumped down and began frantically interrogating the driver. He demanded to know exactly how the intricate chain mechanisms transmitted raw power and how fast the heavy engine revolved. As he rode home that fateful day, the traditional horse-drawn carriage had already become dead to him. In the year 1879, the 16-year-old boy made a shocking decision to abandon the perfect rural life. He turned his back on his inheritance and traveled east toward the towering smokestacks of Detroit. He sacrificed a comfortable destiny just to suffer as a lowly apprentice inside a filthy and deafening machine shop. His daily existence was a brutal test of pure endurance. He fought against stubborn metal for 10 agonizing hours every single day, 6 days a week. His minuscule weekly wage was a mere $2.50, yet his pitiful boarding house demanded $3.50. He was literally paying to work every week. To bridge this desperate financial gap, he spent his exhausted nights repairing broken watches for just 50 cents apiece. Through sheer unrelenting willpower, he transformed himself into a human perpetual motion machine. Over 7 brutal years, he clawed his way up from a starving apprentice to a highly respected and masterful technician of complex steam engine. Full true innovation requires sacrificing comfort to step into the brutal unknown. Chapter 4. Failure, Capital, and Survival. In the year 1886, upon Henry's 23rd birthday, his frustrated father attempted to bribe him back to the land. William offered a tempting 200 acres of prime soil and a beautiful villa. The only strict condition was that Henry must completely destroy his engineering dreams and leave quietly as a wealthy farmer. Henry accepted the generous offer, but he secretly harbored a cunning strategy of deception. Instead of planting crops, he purchased a portable steam engine and a massive circular saw. He ruthlessly chopped down the forest upon his father's land, selling the valuable timber to desperate furniture makers and thriving shipyards to fund his hidden experiments. He married Clara, an intelligent woman who masterfully managed the household and later helped him test his chaotic inventions. With the timber profits, he secretly constructed a hidden workshop directly behind his perfect agricultural villa. While pretending to be a diligent farmer during the day, he obsessively tinkered with radical engine designs long into the night. Eventually, Henry realized that the quiet farm was an intellectual prison devoid of vital technological information. He needed to return to Detroit to access the elite engineering circles, studying internal combustion and electricity. He told Clara they must abandon their comfortable villa, and without hesitation, she bravely agreed to follow his dangerous vision back into poverty. In 1891, they rented a cramped house in Detroit for $10 a month while Henry worked for Thomas Edison. He earned $45 a month babysitting heavy generators through the long, exhausting night shift. By solving impossible mechanical failures, he rapidly rose to chief engineer. By 1893, earning $90 monthly. A true visionary will burn down a safe kingdom to build an empire from scratch. Chapter 5. The Birth of Mass Production. On Christmas Eve in 1893, while ordinary families enjoyed warm turkey dinners, Henry brought a filthy engine into his kitchen. With Clara carefully dripping volatile gasoline into the intake, he spun the heavy crank. The brutal explosion of sound that filled the small room marked the inevitable birth of a radical new transportation empire. By 1896, he successfully built his first functional automobile. However, the ruthless reality of the capitalist machine quickly crushed his early optimism. Early investors demanded expensive luxury vehicles exclusively for wealthy bankers, which directly clashed with Henry's desire to build affordable transportation for ordinary farmers. He was violently expelled from his own companies. Pushed to the absolute brink of financial ruin, he turned to the deadly sport of auto racing to attract new attention. In 1902, he constructed a fearsome racing machine named 999. He defeated the national champion on a frozen lake, securing $28,000 from a wealthy coal merchant. With this crucial funding, the Ford Motor Company was officially born in 1903. He finally released the legendary Model T, a durable and cheap vehicle that immediately sparked a massive avalanche of public demand. To build these countless cars, he constructed the gigantic Highland Park plant, which was the largest factory in the world. However, the ancient method of craft production was severely flawed. Groups of highly skilled artisans would spend days slowly hammering and assembling a single vehicle together. Henry despised this inefficient pace, seeing the slow workers as lazy farm horses. He knew that survival depended entirely upon eradicating human slowness from the profitable equation forever. True efficiency is born from the ruthless eradication of human inconsistency. Chapter 6. The Assembly Line and Human Fragmentation. In 1913, Henry pressed a button that would forever alter the biological destiny of the human race. He introduced the moving assembly line, violently dismembering the complex creation of an automobile into 84 standardized micro-steps. The required assembly time plunged unbelievably from 12 hours down to a mere 93 minutes. But this cold efficiency spawned a terrifying system that degraded living men into nameless biological cogs. If you walked into that massive factory, you surrendered your humanity the second you punched the clock. You were handed a tiny station where the merciless conveyor belt dictated your every movement with an absolute and unforgiving rhythmic cruelty. Worker number 1 did nothing but twist a single nut, while worker number 2 endlessly pushed a wheel onto an axle. You did not need to understand machinery, you did not need tools, and you certainly were not allowed to speak. Supervisors with stopwatches hovered like hungry ghosts, secretly increasing the belt speed to extract maximum sweat. You were strictly forbidden from whistling, singing, or even smiling while you labored through the 9-hour shift. If you needed the restroom, you had to raise your hand and desperately wait for a relief worker to arrive. Even then, you were harshly restricted to a pitiful 3-minute window before you had to resume your post. Workers developed a creepy technique called the Ford Whisper, forcing words through clenched teeth to communicate without moving their jaws. By the end of the shift, exhausted men would walk home with their arms still involuntarily twitching from the senseless repetition. This terrifying neurological glitch became widely known across the city as the dreaded Ford tremor. The perfect machine achieves ultimate speed only by breaking the human spirit into pieces. Chapter 7. $5 Wage and the Creation of Consumers. The factory floor became a relentless meat grinder that destroyed the mental sanity of the working class. During 1913 alone, Ford had to hire 52,000 desperate men just to maintain a core workforce of 14,000. This insane turnover rate of 370% meant constant training and massive hidden financial losses. Realizing that constant resignation was destroying his profit margins, Henry executed a radical masterstroke that shocked the world. In 1914, he suddenly slashed the workday to 8 hours and raised the minimum wage to $5 a day. Desperate men instantly flooded the factory gates, forcing the city to deploy high-pressure fire hoses to maintain order. Wealthy Wall Street investors screamed that he was a lunatic destroying the sacred laws of capitalism. Rival automotive barons were absolutely furious because they were still paying their starving workers a miserable $2.34. But Henry understood that high wages were the ultimate chains needed to keep strong men anchored to the terrible assembly line. With the workforce stabilized, efficiency exploded to unimaginable heights. While the rest of the American auto industry used 66,000 men to build 280,000 cars, Ford used just 13,000 men to crush out 300,000 vehicles. He annihilated the entire national competition using merely 1/5 of the total human labor. Because of this terrifying volume, the price of a Model T plummeted from $850 in 1908 to just $260 by the 1920s. A lowly factory worker could suddenly afford to buy the exact same machine he spent every single day assembling with his own 2 hands. Tells the ultimate system keeps you trapped by paying you just enough to buy its products. Chapter 8. The system that trapped humanity. Before Henry implemented his grand design, the capitalist mindset was brutally simple and severely limited. Wealthy owners crushed wages to keep the peasantry starving while selling handcrafted luxury goods to a tiny group of elite aristocrats. But Henry saw the invisible ceiling of this model. If only the rich could buy cars, who would purchase his millions of vehicles? He once wrote that employers do not truly pay wages. They merely handle the money while the actual customer pays. To create millions of new customers, he realized he must financially empower his own employees. He literally handed them the cash needed to purchase the shiny products rolling off his own deafening assembly lines every single day. However, a crucial problem emerged in his grand psychological design. If a wealthy worker was forced to toil for 6 painful days a week, when would he actually have the time to drive a car? A man trapped in a factory cannot take his family on a leisurely weekend picnic. Time was the missing ingredient for consumption. Therefore, in 1926, the Ford Motor Company shocked the entire planet again by introducing the 5-day work week without reducing pay. The powerful National Association of Manufacturers instantly rebelled against this idea. Their furious chairman argued that the Holy Bible strictly commanded humans to labor tirelessly for 6 full days every week. Arrogant steel executives argued that giving poor men an extra day of rest would only cause rampant alcoholism and rising crime rates. While these old masters tried to control labor with religion and whips, Henry Ford weaponized free time. He programmed the modern mind to believe that weekends were exclusively designed for aggressive and joyful material consumption. However, you were given the weekend not to rest, but to consume what you built. Chapter 9. The psychological cost of efficiency. The implementation of consumer-driven economics changed the fundamental rules of human civilization forever. In ancient times, a king who wanted wealth had to butcher his neighbors and steal their bloody land. Under the new paradigm, nations substituted violent bombs with standardized consumer goods. Mass production spun a delicate web of commerce that established an era of relative global peace. Without this massive public appetite for endless products, astonishing technologies like smartphones and jet airplanes would have remained exclusively within classified military laboratories. Consumer desire provided the infinite mountain of cash required to push miraculous innovations down to the ordinary working class. Mass production utterly destroyed the ancient social hierarchies where only royalty could wear purple silk. But the devil always returns to collect his heavy payment on every signed contract. When consumption becomes the only engine driving society, everything sacred is ruthlessly stripped down into a markable commodity. A person's true value is no longer measured by courage or deep wisdom, but strictly by the expensive price tag attached to their leased vehicle. The system survives only if you remain perpetually dissatisfied with your current existence. It employs massive advertising campaigns designed specifically to harvest your deepest insecurities and fears. The machine screams that your clothes are pathetic and your phone is obsolete. You must suffer endlessly on the treadmill simply to buy trash, to fill the void the system digs. To ensure you never stop running, the system kindly handed you credit cards and brutal installment loans. This invisible debt is vastly superior to iron chains because it steals your unborn future. When you accept a 30-year mortgage, you do not need a cruel overseer barking orders. The monthly text message notification becomes your eternal taskmaster. Huluswar, the perfect prison is one where the inmate works willingly to buy better chains. Chapter 10. The blurred line between master and tool. For over a century, we have willingly submitted to the perfect loop that Henry designed. We trade our biological energy to acquire standardized objects and a faint illusion of personal dignity. We accepted the alienation of the assembly line because we falsely believed that purchasing power equated to genuine freedom. But the foundation of this agreement is cracking. The original compromise relied heavily on the fact that early machines were incredibly stupid and lacked any true judgment. Today, a terrifying technological wave has arrived at our collective doorstep. Artificial intelligence is rapidly learning to replicate both the backbreaking physical labor and the delicate mental calculations that once guaranteed human employment. The ancient labor contract is becoming obsolete. If artificial intelligence entirely eradicates the need for wage labor, the fundamental engine of consumerism will instantly collapse. Without a weekly paycheck, who will possibly buy the endless mountains of goods churned out by tireless robotic factories? We now stand at the trembling edge of an unknown historical abyss where our status as consumers is threatened by our own creations. The system humans built for efficiency eventually began to redefine human value. The line between tool and master became blurred long ago when we adjusted our breathing to match the speed of a moving belt. We built the clock, but the clock now tells us exactly when to sleep, when to wake, and precisely how much our time is worth. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my history channel if you wish to continue exploring the hidden truths of our reality. If the system you live in was designed to control your time, are you still living your own life?